Morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to this episode of Devtalk. Before I start facilitating this session, I wish to express my heartfelt gratitude to everyone, including the viewers of DevTalk, who have been enormously supportive of this initiative, where we've created this platform where we invite policymakers, educationists, innovators, thematic leaders, policy planners, etc., who come and share their experience, of all that have been contributing in the area of social development. And thus far, we have covered, the very pertinent topics related to data for social change, livelihood, behavior change, communication in water sanitation and hygiene. And today we are going to cover yet another very, very important topic, which is the issue of education of girl child. And for this, we have someone with us who has spent almost an entire career in the field of education and rights related to the education of girl child. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce our very, very special guest today, Dr. Manisha Priyam. Welcome, Manisha ji.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this warm welcome and long introduction. And I'm delighted to be here with you on a topic that I've been working on for a long time. But as you reeled off the areas where DevTalks has worked and discussed and spoken to people about, especially in these difficult times of the pandemic, I was actually more curious to hear more about what you may have spoken about in your water sanitation and hygiene programs, in your livelihood programs, because I believe that more than any other time, at this special time of the corona pandemic, issues of livelihood, issues of sanitation, issues of hygiene have come to the front line of human existence. And these are important not just for the poor living in rural areas or for the girl child, but they've become very, very important for human society as a whole. And we being a country where the access to water, sanitation, hygiene is poor, and the access to livelihood is difficult, the circumstances in which we've coped with corona is even more difficult. So I would say I would love to listen to the Dev Talks on these themes and learn a lot more rather than what I may have to speak right now with you. So go ahead and ask your questions. I'm happy to interact today.
Thank you so much. I'm definitely going to do that, Manisha ji. I'm really, really, eager to start this conversation. But Manisha Priyam is a known name in the fraternity in this area of social development. But still, in the interest of the viewers, let me read a formal introduction of Dr. Manisha Priyam. So, Dr. Manisha Priyam is an associate professor at the National Institute for Educational Planning and Administration, MHRD, New Delhi. She has a doctorate in international development from the London School of Economics and Political Science. In the past, in her policy advisory roles, she has worked with the Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India, Government of NCT of Delhi, the World Bank, the UNDP, etc., as advisor on projects related to tertiary education reform, primary education reform, and urban social policies. She, amongst her other works in the area of social development, she has authored a book titled "The Contested Politics of Education Reforms in India: Aligning Opportunities with Interest," which was published by the Oxford University Press, released in 2015. She's a leading commentator on policy and political issues on the print and electronic media in India and abroad. She writes for leading national newspapers and weeklies in Hindi and English, including the Hindustan Times, the Indian Express, Hindu, Mint, Outlook, Dainik Jagran, Amar Ujala, Hindustan, and Prabhat Khabar. And her academic writings have been published in various publications like the India Forum, EPW, Economic and Political Weekly, Seminar, Studies in Indian Politics, and the University News. So after this, I'm sure my viewers must be extremely eager to understand the nuances of education in India. So moving on straight, Manisha ji, you have been contributing, in the area of education for almost 3 decades now, more than 3 decades, and you have studied the education system of India and abroad. Now, seeing it from the lens of the girl child education, can you share, some good practices, that we have in India, and why do you think they are good, and why are they effective according to you?
So, in development studies, in the literature on policies for development, it is commonplace to look at good practices now. Now, looking at good practices, a trend that happens, especially after Judith Tendler's great work called Good Government in the Tropics. Before that, it was commonplace to look at why programs have failed, especially in the third world, and the third world was considered the site of failing policies for development.
Right.
I would go back to India in the 1990s. That's the time that there were very high gender gaps, even with respect to the basic levels of schooling. This was the time at around the 1991 census that Ashish Bose, the demographer, spoke about the Bimaru states. Now, the Bimaru states were an acronym, and they represented mostly the populous and North Indian states to the north of the Vindhyas: Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh. But Bimaru was extended to OU, meaning Orissa and Uttar Pradesh, basically covering almost the Hindi heartland, so to say. And it was here that it was felt that school participation rates were not high. No prizes for guessing that this low participation rate was simply largely on account of girls not going to school. So by 1991, when India was just about getting ready to open up, liberalize, open up to the world, and it believed in itself, and rightly so, in being the world's largest democracy, this was a time that India began to realize that it was performing quite badly even in basic education, and
Yes.
gender gaps were very high, and the East Asian tigers were rising then. So roughly, India realized that the kind of participation that it wanted to have, even with 50% participation rates, East Asian countries, including Thailand, they had achieved similar or higher participation rates by the late 60s and early 70s. So we
Right.
were 2 decades behind. And that was a stunning realization. And that's the time that some of the finest minds put together programs. The program for women's empowerment called Mahila Samakya. It was a women's empowerment program, but it was not placed in the Women and Child Development Ministry. It was opened up in the Education Ministry of the government. And education, it was realized, no strides could be made in school education unless the gender disadvantage was squarely addressed. I think rather than looking at one program, I would like to point to the fact that planning for education in India received a structural jolt in the 1990s by admitting that girls left out of schools means an illiterate India, which is below the 50% level. But I think the synchronized effect of the efforts made by policies thereafter, by basic education programs in states, whether it was the UP basic education program, or it was the Andhra Pradesh primary education program, or the Bihar education program. These are all precursor programs, and they set the stage for a large national program on school education. And in that large national program, the gender component received the maximum attention. And I would say that what was really important was that large-scale mainstream programs of education in the north of India, in the densely populated Bimaru states, began by admitting first that girls need to be brought to school, and that admission by mainstream policy rather than girls only policy, I think that made the real difference.
Right. So very rightly put, all these state education programs were actually helped in setting the stage for, the large national programs. I mean, which got further translated into, the KGVVs and the Navodaya initiatives, which have been really significant in terms of, mainstreaming the girl child into education, especially from the, disadvantaged sections of the society. And it was really surprising to see that our neighboring East Asian nations fared pretty well in terms of girl child education, whereas we have been laggards for a significant amount of time. So what they did, if we see it, globally, what has happened, there, which we could not do here. Something that can be adapted, we could not. Why and how is it, really possible?
Mhm. Uh, I would say that uh, there has been a lot of adaptation in India. It's
Okay.
not that there has not been, I mean, there has been. But I think the big breakthrough was the Jomtien conference in 1990s when the donors agreed that India needs to invest in basic education. And India itself began to understand that. The only catch that India then had, that India did not want to borrow from the World Bank because there were obvious difficulties. Borrowing from the World Bank came with conditionalities. The entire experience of Africa was there, that the conditionalities put by the bank had led to great deprivation and impoverishment of people. So by this time, there was a lot of hesitation to accepting the bank, as it were, as a donor. But the bank itself had become a change institution with a lot of focus on basic poverty, poverty reduction, as it's saying. So I think in India, the big difference was that mainstream planning and large scale programs by 1995, they were ready to address this. But this was also the time that the Supreme Court intervened with its, the midday meal scheme started as a result of the Supreme Court's intervention on the right to food issues. And that meant that along with school programs, we also started a very large school meal program.
Right.
And that meant that by 1998, the expenditures in education were very, very high. Children were coming to school through subsequent court interventions. The school point became a place where humane and good attitude of teachers could be seen. A good meal was served to students, and it was a transformation on scale. It was a large scale transformation.
Right.
So it wasn't just one small program or one small intervention. Now, I would say that yes, doing all this, still by 2000s, we had states like Bihar where overall literacy rates were lower than national average, and the catch-up effect had not been very high. If I remember it, the 2001 census, it was still, I think, just 47 or 57%. The figures may need to be checked. But
Hovering around 40%.
yeah, what I do remember for sure was that Bihar was lower than the national average, and
Yes.
the catch-up had been lower. So Bihar then had to go full scale, which it did by 2005 and 6. And the important changes made in Bihar were the famous, school for girls program, where girls began to ride cycles to go to schools, free uniforms to girls. So suddenly you saw rural Bihar was surging with girls on cycles and girls in uniform, all of them going to the school. So I think that was a dramatic difference. But in each of these cases, what I see is that the dramatic difference has been made by the intervention of the state. And these
Right.
programs are all programs on scale. Small scale has not worked, large scale has. Markets have not worked, state intervention has. And state intervention on scale with especially a focus on girls belonging to rural areas, girls from the weaker socioeconomic castes, that has made the critical difference with bridging the gaps in schooling and in the girl child being left behind. I think the big player has been the state. I've also done a report in the case of Bihar. It's called Bringing the Child Back In. And who brought the child to the school? Not the parents, not the teachers. It's the state that went and caught the finger of the child and said, look, I'm trying to change the school into a better place. I'm trying to change it into a place where you can come as a child. There'll be dari, there'll be tat patti, there'll be teachers, there'll be food for you, we'll look after you. And the chief minister of the state would go visit districts. He would co-locate his government, not in the state capital, but he would go to district headquarters. That meant that the entire district administration became very aligned to development policy goals. Shifting power to the districts rather than maintaining it in the state capitals, having a very, very pro-poor, pro-rural children, pro-girl child approach. I think that is what worked for girls.
Yeah, so I think recently, to cater to some of these issues that have been some of the key chief factors in the as barriers to the girl child education, the new national education policy 2020. It's been now, the government has adapted it, sort of. But would like to have your views on it, because different stakeholders have their own thoughts, views, opinions, and their own shares of criticisms as well as praises. The key stakeholders like the parents, children, they're also kind of sort of confused. So what is your take on this, the NEP 2020?
On the new education policy, I think it's a different generation policy program. It accepts that all the equity orientations of last policies, earlier policies, etc., are all to be continued. And so, in a sense, it's whereas the earlier policy document, the 1986 and 1991 program of action to the new education policy of 1986,
Right.
started with issues of inequality and started with geographical differentiators, gender differentiators, caste-based differentiators. That policy largely remained access-oriented. And I think the critical difference about the 2020 policy is that this policy is focusing very highly on quality orientation. So it accepts that a lot of children have come to school, and if quality is the next frontier, how do we actually give children better quality education? That is the challenge. That is the challenge. And here, I think the state is saying that it will commit itself to quality. Now, the challenges will be many. The challenges will be that the issue of quality is still defined by the teachers and the curriculum. It's not a state-led process. The state can measure quality, but the input is still coming from the level of the teacher, from the level of knowledge, from the world of knowledge. And schools will be that much richer only if the fountainhead of knowledge, which is the universities, the back end, become better providers. So how do we increase the knowledge quotient? And in today's liberalized, globalized world, knowledge is a strategic national asset. You cannot survive international political competition unless you survive the global competition in this area. So having said that the quality issues will need improvement, what I foresee very soon is that exams will give way to large-scale assessments. These changes will happen, but whether we can ensure quality by that or not, how do we do quality learning? This will be the challenge. There are other minute issues also, and I think that is what parents are most worried about, because parents also, they've become parts of this cram mentality. They want to understand, when is the board exam for my child? How many years does he have to study here? When does he or she begin his coaching exam for the next level? So the parental anxieties are really not in sync with what the knowledge providers' anxieties are. And the parents have been party to cramming their children through crash courses rather than through paradigms of knowledge. But the issue really is that parents also need to know that what the grade and stage transitions that are anticipated in this policy will mean for their children. What kind of assessments will they go through, whether they have a 10th standard board exam or not.
Right.
Issue of multiple languages in the schools. What will it mean in reality? If you have a parent speaking Telugu and others speaking Malayali, and you're in a school somewhere in Agra because the parent works in a public sector undertaking, Uh, what kind of teachers do we need to provide for multilingual education? So those are challenges on the supply side. On the parent side, a lot of it is anxiety. A lot of parents still tell me, what's the use of learning an Indian language? And I don't agree with that, and I think the policy is fairly progressive in saying what it says. The love for Indian languages needs to be there, and there's no harm in learning an additional Indian language. Learning Kannada or Telugu or Tamil or Malayalam, it should be easy things. I mean, to look at one country with its multiplicity of languages and cultures is a great idea. But parental anxieties are only about, oh, how will that he be taught this or that language? What's the point learning any other language? And if he's taught, where will the teacher come from? Will he be marked on this? And so the parental anxieties need to align themselves with the fact that somewhere what we require is knowledge and not a cram shop shoved, somehow at any pace, any type of learning. That's not how it should be. Having said that, it still remains a challenge that, for example, in a poor rural area in Bihar or Bengal, how will you start a class on Malayalam? Will you have a teacher for a third regional language in every school? Will you form a hub of schools where they can learn this? Or will you
Right.
just relegate all this to digital learning? I think these will be the challenges.
Right. The NA, does it adequately cover the issue of the girl child, the missing girls from the school? You see, because I was just going through the recent NFHS data for the 22 states and union territories they have released. There is a state which has only about 22% of the girls completing 10 years of schooling. The highest was, I think, 47-48%. I think that was Manipur or some northeastern states. So
And which is the state with 20-22%?
There were these, in fact, surprisingly, Tripura perhaps was the lowest, perhaps the lowest one. And of course, our, Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, these were the schools. So basically,
Girls are not completing till class 10 in these
10th,
states.
yeah. So that's very alarming. So,
Very alarming. So that's when, data tells you the story. I mean, you are
yes.
telling us the story, not me. I haven't seen the NFHS data. But this means that there's something else at work. It's not simply the story that I'm telling you of state provision is
Yes.
taking girls to
Yeah.
school, but not enough to make them complete till grade 10.
So
Questions need to be asked of the state.
Yeah.
This is which round of the NFHS?
The latest, the fifth round. So in fact, all India reports are not yet out because because the COVID, the field work for some of these states could not get over. But they released the data for 22 states and UTs. Second, I can share that with you. So basically, we see that the girl child dropout is a perpetual issue. I'll just quote the UDICE data. The gross enrollment ratio 6 to 8 is 90.9%. Classes 9 to 10 is 79.3. Classes 11 to 12 is 56.5%. So half. So this is so why, what do you think, what are the key barriers?
So gross enrollment data then is an overinflated figure.
Yes.
It will have to be corrected with the NFHS. Needs to be
and whether we need to look at the net enrollment ratio or the gross enrollment ratio, again that's
at all points of time it's the net figures that are better, but
yes.
I don't know whether we can get it.
Yeah,
we'll have to age adjust the data, which
absolutely. So, Manisha ji, I want to understand from you. You have done a lot of research. You have met a lot of girl children, their parents, and everyone. So, what are the chief factors of this dropout?
I mean, I'm surprised to see this, and which is why large surveys like the NFHS are always so important. Now, I'd like to ask the data this question. Whether completion rates that you say are 22%, which is really low for the entire schooling cycle for girls in some states in India, and it includes still large populous states of UP and Bihar, then I think it's a very serious comment that's coming from large scale data. It needs to be collated with old NFHS surveys to make it thoroughly comparable. Forget gross enrollment ratios. If you can see the completion rates, and it would be a great contribution if it can simply be tracked for these, because these states are where the demographic dividend is going to be. So
Yes.
they are going to be the most densely populated states.
Yeah.
So then we would come around to saying that Manisha Priyam said that we have a lot of school policies that are bringing girls to school, but we will write an op-ed that will say that girls went to schools on cycle, wore their uniform, but did not complete schools, and therefore the world's largest population of girl child not completing schools, unfortunately, will be in the states that you talk about. It's very important to help people like us with your data. We'd like to have a look into this, because policy is always the discourse of the state. And if this is the data, then I think it is indeed very, very alarming. And we cannot have a discourse on quality that first cannot tell us while the girl child does not survive.
Yes. While we were talking, I just opened the data, and Tripura is 23%. So basically, the indicator is called women with 10 or more years of schooling. Tripura is the lowest with 23.2%, followed by Bihar 28.8%, Assam 29.6%, and the highest.
What age group does it have? All women.
All women covered under the study. You know. So, but still, I mean, it is very, very, sad to see that,
Can you complete? Tripura is 22, Bihar is.
I can share the entire data with you. Highest is Kerala 77%. Goa is 71.5%, followed by Lakshadweep 67.8%.
But what is the corresponding figure for Bihar, UP?
Bihar is 28.8%. UP, I guess it was not reported because this survey was not completed in UP. UP was not reported.
And any other state? Large state?
Large states, West Bengal 32.9, Gujarat 33.8, Andhra Pradesh 39.6. Andhra Pradesh, which is very sort of the early child marriage is very rampant in Andhra Pradesh. We have read a lot of so all these are so interlinked. They don't complete education, they get married, they get they get into teenage pregnancies, and then so so how important this the whole business of getting everyone into education. Right to education is one thing, but then giving everyone education, like you said, the chief minister actually held the hands of the children and get them to the school. That is something that the states must be doing. Perhaps that's my opinion.
Yeah.
So, Manisha ji, I mean, coming to the last leg of this, now we know where we are, what the issue is. What would you like to give one advice to the policymakers to make sure that this gap is bridged sooner than later?
So, I would say that the advice would be immediately to look at this data very seriously,
Right.
and to look at small scale studies to see the school going age group, relevant school going age group, what is the completion rate in them, say up to girls up to 25, what's the completion rate in them. If you see a higher completion rate in them, then there is a lot of scope and chance, but lower than that would be very difficult. So I think looking at the large data, doing smaller studies, and building state level scenarios would be very, very important. Because small studies, ethnographic studies, qualitative work is important, but if the large data is so glaring, then some policy level analysis need to be done, and a few state level case scenarios need to be developed that can talk of state specific policies that need to specifically address the situation. Now, West Bengal has always been a curious case. It's not a low income state, and still you find that in education it behaves this way. Andhra, one of the southern states, should have been behaving like Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, but does not
Absolutely.
do so. So we need to have state-specific scenario modeling, definitely, which is very, very important. And on the other hand, some amount of assessment of what it takes to bring the girl child to school and make her survive the schooling cycle. And
Yes.
that assessment needs to be made. So these two are the front line as far as I think. Quality, of course, is important, but these are very, very important and will need to be addressed.
Yes, pretty much. I think you have been you have been very candid and shared some very valuable thoughts and incisive views on the issue of girl child education, and you have said a lot. I would just reiterate that when a girl is educated, she is empowered, and when a girl is empowered, the nation is empowered, and India has done a lot, but a lot needs to be done. So thank you so much, Manisha ji,
Sure.
for taking out time from your out of your very very busy schedule and sharing your thoughts on this very important issue. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Manisha ji.
Thank you. And thank you. I'm so happy to be with Development Insights and Pareshji today because I see you all as partners in the kind of work we do. Thank you very much for having me here today. And I hope to learn in the future from all your other talks. And would certainly like to listen more than talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Namaskar.